Welcome to Keep Trucking Personal, where we invite you to explore the heart and soul of our company, Kiwi Brothers Trucking. Through engaging storytelling, insightful market updates, and vibrant energy, our podcast reflects our culture, values, and achievements. Whether you're a team member or industry enthusiast, join us to build connections, foster growth, and inspire excellence. Discover why we're more than just a company. We're a community, a catalyst for positive change, and a home for those aspiring to be part of something extraordinary. The pre-trip is complete and engines ready. We're set to hit the road on the Keep Trucking Personal podcast. Let's go.
Welcome to Keep Trucking Personal. My name is Tyler Keating, and I'm your host. This past weekend, I was able to drive up to Minnesota, and let me tell you, it sure is cooling down. It's exciting to see the leaves changing colors, and, you know, I always rubberneck so much coming up, look at all the rest areas, truck stops, every truck that passes me oncoming, and trying to really get a feel for what's going on out there. And I'm still amazed that every rest area you drive by, how large the shortage of parking is. There's drivers lined up the on-ramp all the way into a rest area, all the way coming out of a rest area. And it's just something that I always, I've been there, done it. It's not fun at 2 a.m. if you're having to run late trying to find a parking spot, especially in one of those on-ramps or exit ramps. And yeah, just a big appreciation for what our truck drivers do out there. And I know the most recent, with the hurricane and the ports going on strike, it's been kind of a crazy week that we've dealt with as an industry. And I'm grateful for every truck driver that's helped in support with Helene, whether it's bringing relief, equipment, or even the drivers that are bringing bottled water or donations from local communities or communities amongst the whole country. It's exciting to see everyone come together. So just a deep level of appreciation. But I really want to spend some time on this episode and talk about hours of service, specifically recapping and the use of PC. I think there's some things that need to be cleared up. And then I also want to just kind of leave it open for debate to see what any other driver's feedback is. But let's talk about hours of service and recapping. I think it's an interesting thing that there's a lot of people that are, I would like to say, not confident in what it means to recap hours or how it works. So I'm going to kind of give it my best description here of what it takes to recap. So, the Federal Motor Carriers Safety Administration allows us 70 hours in 8 days, right, for an over-the-road truck driver. So you can work 70 hours within that 8 days. Now, if you exhaust that 70 hours prior to the 8 days in order to recap, then you're forced to take a 34-hour restart, right? There's nothing to recap. But let's say that you had some evenly paced out days and you were coming up, you've worked all 8 days, and now you're getting close to your 70 being exhausted. Right? Maybe you're right at 70. But at midnight, you'll recap. And I'll explain how that works. What is the best process? What do drivers feel like is the best process? Do you pursue recap, or do you think if you've exhausted your 70, it's best to get a full 34-hour restart and get that full clock back so you can work 14 hours a day versus what you recap? It's an interesting perspective. So if you have any feedback, definitely drop a comment or even reach out to me. I want to hear your feedback, but let's go through it. So you've worked 70 hours in your 8 days, right? You're counting the current day plus your previous 7 days. Now, the way that recap works is essentially like recycling your hours. So that 8th day, if you were to lay them all in front of you, the 8th day falls off. And if you had 10 hours on that 8th day, you'll gain 10 hours back at midnight for the next day. Now, I know, the system motive will tell you there's some nuances. Like if you did a 34 in the middle of that 8 days, there's no recapping that's going to happen because it's just, you can't count the 8th day and have had a recap in the middle or a restart, and then try to recap. It just doesn't work that way. So I think that's where some of the confusion comes from. People and drivers, even office staff, they see that whole 8 days and they go, oh, you're going to gain 10 back tonight at midnight. And then midnight comes on and nothing's gained back. Well, they had a 34 in the middle. So there's some tricky spots that you have to watch through. But from an operations perspective, I a lot of times find it useful to recap. There's plenty of times where a driver can deliver that load on Monday, and in our case, delivering on Monday is what gets it put on your paycheck. So it's an important day. I also think it's important a lot of times to meet the customer standards, and a lot of times the driver might be running cross country and be bumping up against those hours, and where they're more comfortable taking the 34, they may have to run on recap to meet that timeline, right? And that's important. But I still am just amazed that it's such a gray area, and it's not super easy to lay out and for a driver to understand. So, I'll go through it again here. You have 8 days. If you have not taken a 34 in those 8 days, you're going to recap or recycle what falls off. And that happens at midnight. So that 8th day at midnight falls off, and because you moved another day into that 8-day window, and you recap or recycle those hours that fell off. Like I said, it's an interesting spot to be in when you think of an operations, and drivers need rest and recovery, right? A little R&R time. It's not to say that a driver isn't working hard or is working too hard. It's just the fact of what is everyone comfortable with? Because if you don't work a full clock every day, there's a good chance that somebody could recap and work every day. And I've met drivers that really enjoyed that. They didn't like to sit. They didn't like to do a 34. They kept their daily limit consistent. And once they got into a cycle pattern and they got it around that 8 hours to 9 hours, up give or take on each day, because not every day is perfect, they were really happy with that consistent working every day. Now, there's also a lot of drivers that really use that 34 for that R&R, for that laundry, for that getting the truck tidied up and just getting reset and looking at trip planning and all of the things that go into the day-to-day for a truck driver. And does it throw you out of whack? Does it make you feel uncomfortable trying to run recap and not be able to sit down and pencil it out? Back when paper logs were there, you could keep track of your recap right on the far right of your logbook. And, that's obviously been a while now, and many drivers that are newer to the industry don't even really know how to use a paper log because they don't have to. And they're not having to do that manual calculation and count it and really know your days like you used to have to do. So there's a lot of tools in Motive. Motive will tell you if you're recapping. You can also start to forecast if you sit down and, even take and write it out, look at each day, and really start to understand your hours and what you've put in. Just the key highlights in the recapping. So you can't have a 34 within that 8 days. It just won't work because you can't recap what's on the other side of that 34. If you have not had a 34-hour restart in 8 days, you can start to recap or recycle that day that falls off. And that'll allow you to keep moving. The tricky part on this side of the coin is if your days are not consistent, there's been plenty of times where a driver might have a couple 4-hour days at the beginning of that week when they started, and they need more hours than that 4, but maybe they have to deliver, like I said. So you end up recapping using that 4 hours. Well, in order to do a 34, you got to take a full 34 hours off again. So you kind of get caught in a trap where you need to make sure that you have enough hours that it makes logical sense, or if, certain situations you have to deliver. But it's just the thing that I believe every driver should be comfortable in understanding and utilize these hours to their benefit. And it's one of those spots where driver pay is one of the largest topics, right? Feeling empowered, what you do and who the company you work for, the culture. There's many things that go into driver retention and what, allows a driver to stay. But if you're a driver that's questioning your pay and, if you're having to do a lot of 34s, maybe just because of the nature of the load, it's a shorter haul. But if you're doing 34s just to do a 34, is that the right thing to do? If you've got a consistent clock, should you not be trying to exhaust that and get farther ahead and, make more money for yourself? So something to consider. I really want to hear some feedback on the recapping because I think it's an interesting spot. There's also been a lot of conversation that I've had with PC and proper use of PC. And I think it's one of those spots, again, that some people, there's a lot of gray area. It's all interpretation. But I want to kind of give a few scenarios to help put the proper use of PC together. So I'm going to use an example, a couple of them, and I'll try to use a city name and preface it so that it helps paint the picture. But let's start with Duluth, Minnesota. So you deliver a load in Duluth, Minnesota, and you want to take some time to relax. But that's the right thing to do, right? It's your time off. You decide to use personal conveyance to drive to a nearby spot along the North Shore in Duluth. It's beautiful, it's scenic. You you want to get some fresh air and relax. That is a valid use of PC. You can log into off-duty PC and go up the North Shore. You could go up there and, whether it's fall like it's right now and it's beautiful leaves, or you just want to go up there for some food, that is a legal use of PC. However, if you're heading to a different city from Duluth, let's say up to Silver Bay, up the North Shore, to get your next load, and you advance up there towards your next load, it is not considered legal use of PC. So, you can kind of see where it truly is meant to be used for personal use. A lot of people get caught up in that fact that, hey, there's no safe place to park, there's no safe haven. Now, that is a legal and logical use for PC, but remember, some of the best situations when it comes to PC might not be continuing on down the road towards your destination. It might be turning around and going backwards. It's kind of a funny thing because in aviation, when I studied and learned a lot about aviation and flying, most of the time when you get yourself into a situation that you don't want to be a part of, they tell you to turn around and go back out. Now, in trucking, it's a little bit different of a logic, right? We always, as a truck driver, are trying to figure out how do we get to the next place towards our load. But when it comes to PC, you have to be very careful because there's an interpretation, and sometimes that might be turn around and go back to a spot that you drove by that you saw an opening or is there versus continuing to drive towards your destination. You could wind up in a spot where you're getting a DOT violation, and that's not what we want on your record nor our record. So I just want to make sure that it's, a clear use. Now, here's another example. You're going to go from Minneapolis to our Duluth terminal. So you deliver down in Minneapolis and you want to come up to our shop and get an oil change. That is not a legal use for PC. You cannot throw it in PC and shoot up to our shop and say, well, it's personal conveyance. There was nowhere to park in between or this or that. It's just not a legal use. You have to make sure that it is for personal use, not continuation of your trip. So the easiest way to say it is if you're trying to find a safe haven and there's nowhere to park, sometimes you have to look behind you, not ahead of you, because you're continuing a load. So remember that. The other side of it is it can be used for personal use. If you want to go to a gym, you get parked up at your truck stop, you've exhausted your 11 hours, but hey, 10 miles away, there's a gym you're going to go to so you can do some personal exercise or fitness. That is a legal use of PC. You can get in that truck, off-duty PC, and go to that gym and come back to your original spot of origination. So, it's a gray area. I think a lot of people always say, well, I'm not comfortable understanding what PC is. How do I know what's the right use and what's not the right use? The number one priority is if it's for personal use, that is a legal way to use it. Now, if, like I said, just remember, do not try to advance your load 30 miles, 40 miles without a logical explanation of why you could not get parked in the time of your legal hours, your legal 11-hour driving day. And once again, sometimes you may have to turn around. It's gut-wrenching to think, hey, I got to turn backwards and head, the opposite direction I was just heading, but that might be what it takes to make sure you're legal with the use of PC. So, talked about two important topics that I've had a lot of conversation recently. And like I said, the recapping one to me is something that every driver should be very comfortable with, because in a situation where you're under, like I said, a timeline for your shipment, or maybe you're just trying to make that extra dollar and get delivered Monday, know what it is, know what recapping is, and know how it works, and just kind of keep track of it on your own time. And understand where you're at, what you're going to recap, count the hours yourself. I know it might seem foolish when the tool does it. Motive will tell you when you're recapping, and it'll tell you 0. You won't recap anything if you don't obviously recap. But it's something that you should be confident in, because at the end of the day, it's your destiny. You could be making more money or delivering that extra load per week if you understand how it works. Now, I don't take that as I'm saying do not ever do 34s, because on the other side of the coin, I think if you really map out your hours, there's been plenty of times where somebody could have done a 34 and still delivered everything on time and had a fresh clock. So hours of service is a very important topic in trucking, especially in operations. And I've been really focused on operations here for the last couple months on hours of service and usage. And I think it's important to understand drivers need R&R. They need to get their rest and recovery time, and they need to take care of their personal things such as laundry. But there's also a time where they can get that extra load or that understand what's ahead of them with recapping or recycling your hours. And then PC. Like I said, there's a lot of discussion around what's the proper use and how do you use it. So anyone has any feedback or suggestions or wants to maybe dive into a conversation with me about just how to use hours of service for recapping or why they don't ever do that or why they do. And then on the other side of the coin, talk to me about PC. I'd really love to gain feedback from drivers in situations that it doesn't work for them and it does, and understand why they feel that way. So I'm excited to hear feedback there. Like I said, I'm up in Duluth and it's beautiful. It's cool. I'm excited just for the opportunity to see that fall and the leaves. And I brought all my kids with me and everything about Duluth and learn about Duluth. So until next time, thank you for tuning in to Keep Trucking Personal. Please send me an email, send me a text, give me a call. I want to hear your feedback around these two topics, recapping and PC. Until next time, happy trucking.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Keep Trucking Personal. We appreciate you taking the time to explore the heart and soul of Kiwi Brothers Trucking with us. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review to let us know your thoughts. Tune in next time as we continue our journey together, diving deeper into what makes us a community, a catalyst for positive change, and a home for those who aspire to be part of something truly extraordinary. Until then, keep trucking, and we'll catch you on the next episode.